This is Brandon Helwig of UCFsports.com, and I'm honored today to be joined by Ali Peek Wilbur of A Peek Inside Florida Gators Football to talk about this Saturday Sunshine State matchup inside the Swamp. The game is set for a 7:45 kickoff on SEC Network. UCF is 3-1, and as we all know, coming off that 48-21 home loss to Deion Sanders in Colorado. Florida is 2-2, coming off a bye week, and prior to that, a 45-28 win at Mississippi State. Welcome, Ali.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Well, thanks for joining me. I mean, I've known you on social media, I guess, on Twitter through the years and seen your tweets. I know you worked in the Orlando area for a little while and in radio, but yeah, I know your Gator ties run extremely deep. I know we were just talking off air about that. Just kind of tell us a little bit how long you've been a Gator, I guess, obviously since birth, and kind of your history going back.
Yeah, my grandfather actually played for the Gators very late 40s into the early 50s. My dad played late 70s. My husband was on the 2006 national championship team. He was a senior that year. My younger brother was a freshman on the 2008 national championship team. And so we, orange and blue blood for sure. I have grown up loving Florida football, following all things Florida athletics. So
I mean, obviously you've been around for, I guess, I don't know what we want to call it, the golden age of Florida Gator football history when Steve Spurrier arrived in the 90s. I know you were probably pretty young back then, but you probably remember some of those experiences and some of those trips. And obviously, you were older when Urban Meyer got there for those two championships in the 2000s. But just kind of looking back on, your lifetime with the Gators, what are some of your favorite memories?
So I was 12 when Florida won the national championship in 96, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I cut out every single article from the Tampa Tribune, from the St. Pete Times, from the Gainesville Sun, and they were like taped all over my wall growing up. And it's actually cool because now as an adult and doing this, I've gotten to, do shows and stuff with some of those people that I had taped up on my wall when I was little, which is really, really fun. That was, core memory for me for sure. This is random, but when I was 10, I caught a wristband from Jack Jackson, who that's going to be a name from the past for people, but he was a running back for Florida, eventually went and played for the Bears. Still have that somewhere in this house. And then it's pretty hard to top watching, at the time he was my boyfriend, but Eric won an SEC championship and a national championship. And then to watch my little brother, I picture him as 7 years old in his Gator jersey. So getting to watch him, follow that dream and win was really, really, really special.
Yeah, so I mean, as someone who's so connected, the whole family. I mean, I take it these last few years have been kind of tough around the Peek and Wilbur household. So, are you guys surprised? I mean, everyone's going to be talking about Billy Napier and his status and kind of maybe why it didn't work out. I guess nothing's official yet. Although I know during the bye week, I know your channel and a lot of other channels are already getting hot and heavy into the coaching carousel, even though nothing has officially happened yet. But yeah, why do you think, can you kind of maybe sum up, and I know this has been debated a lot, why do you think it really just hasn't worked out with Coach Napier?
I have maintained well before Coach Napier that I don't feel like Florida is an on-the-job training facility. And I think that that's kind of what it's being used for right now. I think looking back, it probably was a red flag that every single person that worked with him at Louisiana somehow was qualified to then become a coach in the SEC. I think maybe he should have taken a couple key staff people with him and then really done a better job cherry picking some of the top coaches in our conference, looked at the Big Ten, things like that, because it just is a different level of intensity. And I think probably the biggest misstep was the original hiring of the strength and conditioning coach. He did bring somebody over from Louisiana Lafayette. I can remember the very first summer practice we went to, my husband was like, oh no, this is not going to work. This is not good. This is not nearly as intense enough. They are not physically tough enough. And, it took 2 seasons for us to replace that strength and conditioning coach. But unfortunately it takes about a year or more to see the results of the new strength and conditioning program. So I don't know that he'll last long enough for us to see if that was an improvement there. But I don't think that we have been dominant enough physically for our conference. And I don't think we've recruited well either line. And, this game is won in the trenches in any conference, but absolutely in the SEC. And Florida's offense and defensive line have not been good enough under Coach Napier.
I know, regardless of what happens this weekend with this game, it doesn't get any easier after this with Tennessee, Kentucky, who just beat Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas. So it seems like it doesn't seem like it bodes well for Napier's future. So if I had to put you on the spot, and I know everyone's been talking, every message board, on Twitter, social media, everyone's talking about, coaches, whether it's Lane Kiffin or some of these other names could be in the mix. If I had to put you on the spot right now, who do you think will be coaching Florida football in 2025?
I do think it'll be Lane Kiffin. I have heard from multiple sources that he does have interest. There's mutual interest there. The unfortunate thing for Florida fans is it almost feels like Lane Kiffin or bust. Like if we don't get him, then whoever we get is going to feel like a disappointment. And there just doesn't seem to be a ton of established names that might actually be possibilities. And I think the last things Gator fans want is another person that we're going to have to train on playing, Big Four football. And it feels very Lane or bust. And I don't love that because that's not a great position for UF to be in.
Obviously, Florida Field, the Swamp, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium has such a great reputation as one of the toughest places to play in college football. Obviously it's still a great environment. With the way the last couple of years have gone, is it still the same from what you remember? Is it a little bit, dull a little bit, or how would you characterize, I guess, what UCF people are going to feel on Saturday night?
It's always a great environment. I don't feel like this season has been as intense as even last season, because Florida hasn't had a lot to cheer about. The Miami game, the opener, you're generally never going to get a more intense crowd than what you get week one, right? We're all hopped up on all the stuff we've been fed in the off season. We're going undefeated. We're ready to, whatever. Every team is like that, right? And I think there was never a single moment of that Miami game where Miami wasn't in control. And so the crowd was taken out of it pretty early. And, that makes it hard to be a tough, intimidating environment when there is literally nothing to cheer for. I will say with Texas A&M, that game was wild because it started 20 minutes past when it was supposed to. We had a 35-minute lightning delay. As soon as they brought everybody out from the lightning delay, it then poured for 45 straight minutes. And I'm telling you, poured so hard that I was having to do this to be able to see anything on the field. And at the end of that pouring rain, the stands were still packed, which, I think is impressive. It says something about Gator fans. They're pretty much done with the Billy Napier era at this moment, but I also think they realize he's our coach now. These are our players now. We should support the team that we have. And you know what? If he turns it around, let's say he rips off, 6 or 7 wins, and I'm in no way saying that's going to happen, but then he does retain this job and he is our coach. So it's a weird position for fans to be in, but it is a great venue. So it's only going to depend on how the very beginning of this game goes, I think.
Yeah. Now, I haven't been to a game there since 2006, which was UCF's last visit to the Swamp. What are some of the traditions? I mean, I feel like a lot of these things are widely known. Now there's the Tom Petty song. Is that at the end of the third quarter? I remember I went to a game as a kid. I remember Mr. Two Bits in the 90s. And isn't there an honorary someone that just tell us a little bit about some of the traditions that we're going to see inside the stadium?
So before kickoff, before they bring the teams out of the tunnel, you will see your honorary Mr. Two Bits, which is a really cool tradition. George Edmond was the original Mr. Two Bits, and he would open every single game with 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, $1, all for the Gators, stand up and holler. And now, once he retired, it kind of became like a position of honor. They honor former athletes or, important figures in the university lore, I guess.
Right.
And it's been a really neat tradition to kind of transition into that. And then you will see at the third quarter, we'll sing We Are the Boys, which is Florida's fight song, and everybody will sing that together, put their arms around each other. The entire stadium sways, which is cool. And then they'll go right into Tom Petty's Don't Back Down. And that tradition kind of grew organically right after Tom Petty passed away. They played it at that point, and everybody brought out their phones and turned on their flashlights, and the whole stadium it was just so cool that it just kind of became a tradition, which I am such a college football traditionalist that I don't love the idea that 5 years ago we just created a tradition everywhere, but it is one of the coolest things. So I'm so glad you guys are getting to see a night game, because it happens, no matter what time we kick off, but it's so much cooler at night. They turn all the lights off and everybody is so into it. It is, for only having been around a few years, it is such a cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of UCF fans are making the trip. Like I said, some might just drive up day of the game, but some people are making a weekend out of it. I'm making a weekend out of it, open up the wall a little bit for some of these hotel prices, which are pretty crazy. But for those of us that are maybe getting there on Friday, staying through Sunday, are there some places that, you would recommend for, fans to check out? Maybe areas near the stadium, restaurants, anything to see? Like, what would you kind of tell someone maybe visiting Gainesville that isn't that familiar with the city?
Well, if you have the ability to go to Spurrier's, I would absolutely do that. It's not too far from campus. It's a couple miles from there. Spurrier is known to walk around on Friday nights and, take pictures. There'll be lots of former players, kind of who's that wander around there. That entire area is really cool. There's an outside space. The cheerleaders will probably be out there. It's a neat experience. And then the Swamp Restaurant is one of my all-time favorites. Originally, it was across the stadium. So I
remember that, because I went to that one before. One of those games back in the day, it was literally across the street, and they knocked it down, right?
Yeah, they knocked it down and built townhomes, unfortunately. But the old general manager is now the owner, and he took the blueprints of the original house that it was in and had it rebuilt a couple blocks from campus. It looks just like it used to, except now they have a much bigger patio, which is pretty cool. Same menu that it was, all the same memorabilia that was inside, a lot of the same drink specials, ironically, which, have stood the test of time for the last 25 years. It's a really cool place to go either before the game or on Friday night, after the game. Even Sunday brunch is a neat experience there. And it's it's traditional Gainesville game day, in my opinion. And I'm always, if you're a fan of hole in the wall bars, Grog House, on the strip right across the street from the stadium. That's where I met my husband. Your shoes will stick to the floor, and your beer might be warm, but it's such a fun, college bar to experience.
Awesome. So this series, I guess, was announced in summer of 2021. And a lot, at least for UCF, has happened since that time. They got the invite to the Big 12 about, a little bit more than a month afterward. UCF and Florida met later that season at the end of the year in the Gasparilla Bowl, which UCF won 29-17. I mean, if all those things would have happened, I'm not sure if this series would have been scheduled or not. But there's two more games. We'll see if they happen or not. 2030 is supposed to be in Orlando, 2033 back in Gainesville. I feel like at some point the SEC is going to go to a 9-game schedule sooner than later. And so I think this will be easy if you're UF to kind of put on the chopping block. But we'll see. We'll see if these games get played in a few years. But how do you think the average UF fan views UCF? Obviously through the years, UCF coming up through the ranks. Florida's a legacy program inside the state. Now the dynamics have changed somewhat with UCF now a member of, what we call now the Power Four in the Big 12. UF maybe, like I said, kind of fallen in stature the last couple of years. So no longer maybe, a top 10 program like a lot of us were accustomed to through the years. So how do you think UF people are viewing UCF right now?
I still think, and I know this is going to kill your viewers, I still think UF views UCF a little bit as the little brother.
Which is fair. Be honest.
It is, for so long, it was Florida, Florida State, and Miami. And I think it's going to take a lot for them not to view themselves as that. And I think Florida fans look at things like a bowl game where, we had a bajillion guys opt out. And I understand, because I'm one of those people that was like, well, Georgia beat the pants off of Florida State. Florida State had people that opted out. Georgia chose to play. I want the bowl games to matter. So I don't love completely wiping away, that they happened. But, I think that's something you would hear from Gator fans.
Right.
In terms of the scheduling, I know Florida fans were kind of upset when this was happening, because originally UCF was saying it only has to be home and home. Only home and home.
Right.
because and for Florida, there's not a whole lot of upside to just a home and home. We play an incredibly tough schedule anyway, so it's not like we need a padding of strength of schedule, which, by the way, I think you guys do for us this year. I think that this, you're part of what makes this such a gauntlet the entire year. I would much rather be playing like the Sisters of the Blind than UCF this season, because it very well could end up as another loss on this schedule. But I know that irked UF fans back when it happened. I think everybody was happy with the 2-1, and I think that was probably more reasonable for when it was negotiated. But I think Gator fans are nervous, honestly. If I'm being completely truthful, I think Gator fans are nervous because while they do view UCF as a little brother, they also know where our team is at this exact moment. And little brother absolutely has the ability to beat up bigger brother this year.
So if UCF wins this game, do you think we'll have some news on Sunday regarding Billy Napier? Is this a must? I mean, I feel like we're going to be saying this a lot this season, even if they beat UCF. But do you think there'll be some news on Sunday if UCF wins?
I think a decision will be made. Whether or not we're told on Sunday might be something else. But I do think this could be the final nail for Billy Napier. I personally hope we hear news on Sunday if we lose, because I just don't understand how you can you keep the fan base, if you have a Sunday with no news, if Florida has lost to UCF. I think Gator fans have kind of reached their limit, and we're all in such a weird position. I personally hate the idea that I'm over here saying like, yeah, that person needs to be fired. That is not a position to be in. And this is somebody's livelihood. And, he's going to have $26 million, but all the people that work for him, this puts them in a tough spot. And I on a human level, I hate that for all of them. But we haven't seen improvement in 3 years. This is not Florida football. This is not even progress, really, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have thought UCF would be in similar shoes if we would have talked a couple weeks ago, but the fan base is kind of in dire straits after this loss to Colorado. People are wondering, where the team is. Have they really improved since last year? They were supposed to upgrade a lot of spots via the portal. Maybe that hasn't translated what we've seen on the field so far. The first 2 games, you can kind of wipe them out because, UCF outmatched a team from FCS New Hampshire, and then Sam Houston's new to FBS. So whatever happened in those games doesn't really count. And so all we've got to go on for UCF is a ferocious comeback to win at TCU, and TCU may not be as good as what maybe we thought after that game, and then losing pretty much was the worst home loss since the winless season in 2015, the worst home loss to Colorado the other day. So we're all kind of wondering what we're going to see against Florida. I know Florida fans kind of feel the same. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this 2-quarterback system, because obviously Graham Mertz comes in, transfer from Wisconsin. You've got freshman DJ Lagway, who's probably the future, but who knows what's going on with portal, if there's a coaching change and all that. But I guess both quarterbacks are going to play. How does that system work, and kind of what are the strengths and weaknesses of both?
So, the strength is that they're both good players. I think Graham Mertz has a higher floor, and I think DJ Lagway has a higher ceiling. I think DJ Lagway is more apt to make freshman mistakes. He's also more apt to make that play that makes ESPN top 10. Graham Mertz is not a guy that you're going to get to make mistakes. Now, conversely, he's not going to make ESPN's top 10 highlights, more than likely, but he is a good game manager. He is steady, and he does not make mistakes. My biggest issue with the 2-quarterback system is the fact that we telegraph what we're doing. Billy Napier has decided that he is going to script who has what series before the game starts. And his logic is what he has told the media anyway, is that he likes doing it that way because he doesn't feel like it makes one guy look over his shoulder for the next guy. And I do understand that concept, but I also think you got to sometimes stick with the guy that has the hot hand.
Right. You got to go with the hot hand. If someone's doing well, you don't want to yank him out next series.
Yes. I don't think that's great for either one of their psyche. I really don't think it's great for DJ Lagway's development. I just would prefer, and I understand the concept of wanting to get your true freshmen some reps, and letting the fan base see what the future is. There's some kind of PR moves with that as well. And I understand all of that. I just don't think I understand the okay, Graham Mertz drove down the field and scored. Now let's hand the ball to DJ Lagway. I don't love that. But I've also, one of my largest complaints about Billy Napier as a play caller has been that I felt like he doesn't have a great feel for the game. It's not even that his game plan is bad, because it's not. And his scripted plays at the beginning of the games are great, but it just is like he doesn't have a feel, and sometimes that kills momentum. And I just feel that same way about this quarterback rotation. But they're both really good players, and they both bring Lagway has a speed, but they both have an arm. They both are very accurate. Florida has a very strong running game. Florida's offensive issue is that their offensive line is not great. Their skill players are very talented and can beat you. It's just going to be whether or not the line gives time for that to develop.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about other players to watch on offense. Who were some of the names to watch? You mentioned the running game, the skill players. Who were some of the standout Gators?
So Trey Wilson is Florida's best wide receiver. We don't know if we're getting him back this week or not. He got his knee scoped a couple weeks ago, and in the SEC, you have to release an injury report every conference game.
Right.
For non-conference. So we're not getting an injury report this week. We did hear reports that he practiced some. So, I don't know. Will he go? Maybe. He is probably Florida's biggest wide receiver weapon. But we have Badger came in as a transfer from Wisconsin. He has been very, very good for Florida. DK came over from Arizona State. He followed Pearsall. He has been explosive as well. Aiden Mizell really turned it on against Mississippi State. He actually, I don't know if you saw, he had a touchdown that ended up being called back, but it was one of the most beautiful runs that we have seen in a very long time.
He's a local guy from Boone High School in Orlando. Yeah, UCF recruited him too.
And, they really do have a lot of young wide receiver talent. And then, I would say Florida's running back room is probably their best room on the entire team. Montrell Johnson will probably get the start, but there is just a stable of guys. You'll see Webb a lot. You'll see Jaden Baugh. You might see Jacoby Jackson. There is so many options at running back for Florida. And again, it's just what this offensive line can do. They really spent the first several weeks of the season, and again, this is not necessarily something I agree with, but rotating that offensive line very methodically. Like, it wasn't like, okay, you stay until you make a mistake and then you come out. They really did rotate series with a lot of guys to try and kind of figure out who their top 5 are. Coach Napier did say this week he feels like pretty confident in who his 5 guys are now. So will that bring stability? I don't know. I don't know that I think Florida doesn't have that just 5-star offensive guy that's just going to gobble up defenders. But we need them to be more consistent than they've been if we're going to win.
Yeah, so looking on the other side of the ball on defense, I think this was the matchup that, everyone is kind of looking at with UCF and the supposed strength of their running game with RJ Harvey and some of the struggles that Florida has had stopping the run. They gave up 240 yards rushing to Mississippi State. I think it was 310 to Texas A&M the week before. So it's been an ongoing issue. Is that sort of where maybe the most concern is can Florida stop a team with a good running game?
I think that that's what Florida fans think is the linchpin to this game, is whether or not Florida can stop UCF's run. Like, can we take Deion's blueprint and implement it in Gainesville? We need to load the box and we need to force KJ Jefferson to beat us through the air. My assumption is that Jason Marshall Jr. will play a large role in that. He's probably Florida's best DB. Whether or not he plays well will have a large, say in whether or not KJ Jefferson is successful through the air. But Florida's D-line has been awful, like not bad, awful. And it is a position that we were hoping was going to be one of a little bit of strength this season, and it has not turned out to be that at all. But the problem for Florida is if they can't stop UCF, and I know you guys are sitting at second in the nation in rushing yards. We play Tennessee in 2 weeks, who is 4th in the nation in rushing yards and has probably played tougher competition there. So if we can't stop you, we're for sure not stopping them either. And it becomes just such a long road through the rest of the season.
Yeah, just kind of looking at the health of the team. I know you've mentioned a couple of injury issues. What's the overall health looking like after 4 games? Were there any opt-outs? UCF, they had a bye week in there, so this was just their 4th game, and we're kind of seeing where everything kind of falls. UCF's second leading receiver opted out this week, a backup safety. There's rumors maybe there's some other guys who may be kind of hanging it up this week. What's that front looking like for UF?
So to Billy Napier's credit, there's not anybody that has chosen to opt out so far, or at least not that we have gotten any word on. And Florida did have several injuries. Our bye week came at the perfect time as well. And so I think we're getting a lot of guys back. Wilson is probably the most notable that we'll see whether or not he is back in the game. But if we don't have him this week, more than likely we'll have him next week if he's already practicing. So, I think injury-wise, Florida's looking pretty good right now. And, opt-outs are kind of linked to buy-in, right? And
right.
At least publicly, it appears that this team is still bought in. That could change, obviously, if we lose on Saturday. But as of right now, I think Napier still has this locker room, and nobody's, looking towards the future just yet.
And last thing, for UF to be successful this weekend, for this to be a Gator win, what do you want to see? What needs to happen?
Florida's got to stop UCF's running game. That's going to be the key for Florida. They're going to have to force KJ Jefferson to throw the ball. I think Florida wants to get into a track meet, which is not something that we have said with a whole lot of Billy Napier offenses in the past. But I think Florida wins this game by getting into a track meet with UCF.
Yeah, I don't think after the last couple of weeks, I don't think UCF wants to get in a track meet. There's some definite concerns with stopping passing games and some secondary issues, lack of a pass rush or whatnot. But Ali, I really appreciate it. I've had a good time talking to you and learning more about UF, and I know our fans will appreciate the insight as well. And I know you've started this YouTube channel fairly recently, right? I know it's really blowing up, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, about a year and a half ago, somebody that my producer, who I used to do a Florida State podcast with, was like, you have to jump on YouTube. And, so it's just kind of been a hobby, but it has really grown. We just hit 3 million views last week, which was pretty cool. So it's fun to continue to watch it grow.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Ali. And maybe I'll talk to you at some point in the future if there's another UCF UF matchup.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.